Well, from economic issues to political risk, the House entering its fourth day of electing a speaker. We have Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman to break down the chaos. Rick, you've got one eye on the economy, one eye on the House. Let's start with what we saw in terms of the jobs numbers, though, because President Biden says, look, this is a sign that my economic plan is working.
Yeah, and if you put the two together, Akiko, the economy is running smoothly on its own. There's been a lot of talk about, are we going to have a recession early in 2023, in the middle of 2023? We're not seeing it yet. And thank God, because if we needed any kind of fiscal intervention from Congress today, Congress would be unable to do it. I mean, because of this circus with the Republicans trying to elect a speaker, I mean, the House is not functioning as a legislative body right now. It can't vote on legislation. It can't hold hearings. It can't do any normal legislating activity. I guess the assumption is that this is only going to last for a few more days, but it could go longer than that. I mean, the longest this has ever gone on in congressional history is something like 2 months. So at least for the moment, we can say the economy does not look like it needs any help from the government at this point, and that may be the case for the next several months and perhaps all of 23. So I think everybody looking at the dysfunction in the House would think that's definitely good news.
And so then when you look at perhaps some of the shifts in the front runners that are still up for Speaker of the House, how is this now looking now as we go into this fourth day?
I've given up on trying to predict who's going to win this, what the final outcome is going to be. But I think if you zoom out, and let's be honest, I think most Americans have either fallen asleep or changed the channel on this silly drama. But if you zoom out, I think one thing this whole specter is telling us is that these 20 far-right Republicans are going to have outsized control of the Republican agenda and outsized control of the House itself for the next 2 years. And if you look at these so-called negotiations that are going on between McCarthy and these 20 holdouts, basically what these amount to is McCarthy surrendering the power of the Speaker of the House through one measure and then another, so that a tiny minority of Republicans can sort of call the shots in the House. And I think this just tells us we're going to have possibly just chaos in the House for the next 2 years. This will matter when it gets around to extending the federal borrowing limit. The votes are there to do that because most Democrats, we forget about the Democrats, they still have 212 seats in the House, nearly a majority. But when it comes around to votes, most Democrats will vote for extending the borrowing limit, and so will many Republicans. But the question now is whether these 20 holdouts could change the rules or actually prevent a vote from happening. And this will also be an issue when it's time to fund the government for the next fiscal year, which begins in October. So this may not all matter that much for the next several months. The economy seems to be powering itself through pretty nicely, but this is going to matter later in 2023.
Rick, I want to get back to that point where you said, this points to the House's inability to legislate. I mean, we're talking about fiscal issues, one, but we've also heard of new lawmakers who, for example, can't get their briefings because they haven't necessarily been sworn in. I mean, can you talk about the implications the longer this drags on?
It just will reduce the relevance of the House on an ongoing basis. And I mean, let's also remember so the House is technically, I don't know how this breaks down. I mean, everybody is dusting off, the congressional rule books from 2 centuries ago to figure this out. But the House is not functioning as a legislative body right now. So literally every member of the House, since they get reelected, since they're up for reelection every 2 years, they are all new members of the House who need to be sworn in again. None of them have been sworn in. No House committees are doing normal House committee stuff. The committees aren't even formed yet. I mean, they haven't even appointed the members of the committees. So importantly, that means they're not holding hearings. And eventually they will begin to hold hearings. But again, to go back to what is the upshot of all this chaos that's happening, probably it means that these far-right Republicans, radicals, if you will, some call them the Taliban 20, they're so far-right, they will probably end up having more power over committees. They will have more power to direct the types of hearings committees hold, things that the committees might investigate. So, we are potentially looking at a real farce for the next 2 years, which is the amount of time these people will exert outsized control over what the House of Representatives does.
11 rounds of votes, and yet nothing.
Get ready for more.
Rick. We'll be ready for more. You're right about that. Rick Newman, as always, thanks so much for that.
Bye, guys.